Ḳuteeyí, siw da Gusitan, Ḳuteeyí da Gusitan, Ḳuteeyí. Ya Єкії.
Wan Qalins Tıkat de ya Ḳuteeyí. Ya Ḳuteeyí Ḳuteeyí has to tuasagu we yao. Yatayach we Ḳuteeyí. Aqawe Ḳuteeyí yanda shuk. Ya yanda shuk aya. Aqa qatuasagu qa how da'a ne da'a qa dao da'a. Ya we hatuasagu. Ya Shingit tundatani chu ya yeast talk. Ḳuteeyí ya nechich. Chite aya we yao. Ya has yanda shluku. Ya we ya yidat shingitani kakrekhatiti. Ya Lenape has to anika yachati that Princeton you do a sagwe schoon plane. Ya krechatiti. Has to inkachwanik ya adat ha at u has to jiwu. We museum yik. Tatke awe we itikate ayachagut. Khosatin ya ha ayi klakt sich Tuk, Hedu, Ḳuteeyí, Hit, Chagudach Ayi, Chagudach, Sheldon Jackson away, our tau, Gashayaw Dach, Yishlinkit Ani Dach, Shitka. Ye away has to inkach wanig. Ach tuas Gushukwa Aya Chushkinach Yuch Achtatani, Khosatin Aya Haat U. Tesha ani kukha. Chuya ya achlisko has ya hasyati. Has to in you achtatan. Chak away teshas aw ach ya hayukatangi. Ya yidet khoa. Ye awe achtu yeti. Kuk tut yeti ya achlisko has yak. Masa achtu asagu. Neshte aya khosha'i. Aqa away ya shingit at kikaye gakwati shingit ayi. Atlain at away. Hajit has our tau. Aqa icht tishaguni. Yashtakat way shingit. Ach kaudutzagan ya has to da it. We wuna itch. We icht koa. Ichaji. We as Ḳuteeyí aya Kayaaní. Ako at adain aya Kayaaní. Aka kinde. Ichasaku wanachsawi. What take as koa. At that the way would do a chut. Dasa atuyeti. Nuch yach gukwati icht was gen has aus sata yet a kach we asked the nuchu akade the kat has to jishaguni has to jiu has to nanai it aya kuchte has kuchte art yek has kuchsati yek we has to it icht aya has to ide guchte shi a joy tachawich ashatin ya thinket at kikaya has to jishaguni achu awi gled hach ak has awas kuan ya deach ye kutu nuk a joy we icht has to iqaya has kuwashian a dach has awa tau has to ai Masa Ḳuteeyí ye has wutien, a de ye has kunuguye. A joy ya that achtuas a good just the kata ai kuchte aya gachtuta ha. A kake ha guchtzin. Nishtakata ʻuteeyí Ḳuteeyí ʻuteeyí. Yat each Jishugu at Gleidchar enach chonach lidzi aya llingit studultu. Llingit enach skone aya qagachi ach qone aya yich enach kakwata ya hayuchatangi. Ya achtu yake kasiye ya chonach nashriye ewe yechat yati. Away watching you at Singit Enach. Ye chish zoom hat ate zoom yidat. Ye awe dach has to equals at 2 young. At the way Kone ka wakshi you kagach tusla arden. Achu agwas has to 2 cow the net. Has to us a gook a dane aya hasaku. Yes, ya wakayan. Ḳuteeyí ʻunei yeshatzin. Ya ʻchuni awe yeshatzin. Kadain awe at ashayech kajin kajaku sati. Achawe achto asaku atshuk yukatangi khashayechi. We chat the kakach shahit dech hayukatangi. Shukwa. Chush tu edishi. Tesh tush ani yukatangi like. Chush tu edishi. Nana'i. What kanachawe kan etu yeti. Wait dayachay yukagachila at. Kashet ekwa at koa. One kanins just atshuk yukatangi tin. It play nach ka ko a khatke wo wus sheet kadach ko sheet kadach ka. Das so yata. Ko ach aya ke khatwu wati. Na ina. Oh ha hasakut das so we. Ye awachana kawani kwan kanins so play khayatki. Knachawe tesh has 2 words on we shingit yatki team. Kakone ke hasue ich shingit yatki. Ye awe kunchi shaqeti sa achi wali tuasagu yuqi watani shingit khinach gukde etcha wuchu khagachtulla atlet khinach helwasak koti chaltakata dewe ye kha ide kakwanik ka yi uji yesaya kakwanik yi ithoha chadusa de tuasagu. Okay, well, let's reflect. That was fun. You know, if we can go 10 minutes, great. If we go 20, wonderful. If we go 30, spectacular. So we start off talking about weather and herring. And what else did you folks catch? I said quite a few things. I got nobody to talk to over here and playing it. So I had to really talk it all to you folks.
You were talking about the museum there.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
I heard the word we learned the other way, the the shaman.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the medicine people. So I walked into a room and I'm here talking about like museum and curation and stuff and what now kind of questions. And it's been really fascinating. They've been just wonderful, kind hosts over here. And so I fly back tomorrow. But I walked into a room and there's all these things, a whole bunch of our stuff in this room in a museum. It's actually a storage facility because they're building a new museum. So I started naming them. Ḥuqt. And what is ḥuqt?
It's a bentwood box.
Bentwood box. X'éig. What is X'éig?
It's a dish.
Yeah. Ḳuteeyí,
Basket.
Ḳuteeyí.
Carved pole.
Yeah, well, in Hitk. Little house. So I saw these things and I said, well, seeing our things here, I want to speak Tlingit to them. Maybe it's been a long time since they've heard Tlingit. So I started to talk about how things were taken from us, but how coming here, walking into that room, I felt like my ancestors were there and I wanted to talk to them in Tlingit. But then I said, I also feel like my ancestors are trapped inside of a box and I really want to bring them home. And I want them to be back on Kayaaní, and that we're impoverished and struggle without our things, so many things taken from us. And I said, long time ago, when Tlingit people passed away, their body was all burned up, burned everybody. Cremation was the thing, except for the medicine people, which they would kind of entomb, I think, using it. They would hollow out a tree and put it over them on top of another tree, I think. And all of their tools would be entombed with them because they would come back as a X'éig, as a spirit helper for the next generation of the Icht. And when some people who came among us figured this out, they started to go and find them and take all their stuff from them. And I just think, what a horrible thing. What a horrible dehumanizing thing. If like we just found that, like if we just went and dug up all the popes and took all their stuff, like it's just kind of unthinkable for that kind of, like who would do such a thing? But it's usually not really on a regular basis considered. And then and we didn't bring any of the Icht things out because those aren't suitable for public viewing. We had students there and stuff. But then I have this, I'm over here proposing this project where we just get everything back. And then we have these museums take pictures of everything and they could put up the pictures of stuff they had and talk about, do a lot of educational work on why Sheldon Jackson is, he was the pipeline to Princeton and why so many things got brought here. And then to have these museums raise money and universities to hire artists to make new things to put in there. And then they'll work with master artists, weavers, carvers, who can then work with apprentices. Everybody gets paid as the museums raise all this money. And then they make new stuff and then they leave some new stuff and then they take the stuff back. And then this network of museums who are the kind of the lead perpetrators in this whole thing. I'd probably say Denver, Portland, Burke, Chicago, Penn, Princeton, and the National Museum of the American Indian, and also the American Natural History Museum. And that we could probably identify quite a few more, but that they form a network that builds facilities where we can safely store our things in our communities. So we could bring museum type knowledge to our communities and indigenize it. But then I also was talking about how excited we are this time of year because it's all kinds of weather, and the herring are spawning. And when the herring spawn, it's like a whole new year. And then I think maybe the last thing I shared was I taught people here 2 words, and maybe I'm gonna get kicked out of the clan house, but I taught them chushtu idishi, which means go touch yourself inside, and ʼunei, which means death for you, which aren't the best things to learn, but sometimes you get really mad at people. And then sometimes, you know, I was talking to someone who doesn't really speak Tlingit, understands a lot, and knows a lot too. But then that person said, hey, what does this mean? ʼunei na. We used to yell that when the white kids are really mean and racist to us. I said, oh, that means death for you. Here, take it. And so those are pretty serious phrases. They're used teasing a lot. So I also said it's ʼuteeyí. It's a sensitive thing, but it's used a lot in teasing. Both those phrases, my uncles used to say both of them to me sometimes. And so, but you guys are deep into year 2 of Tlingit, so you got to start learning some of the real stuff too. And so, but we were getting ready to do a public presentation. I think people were nervous because they wanted to say our names correctly, and they're trying to really get the sound, and they're having a real hard time with it. So I shared just a couple of funny moments right before we went live. And so luckily it wasn't live streamed or anything like that, but always good to see you all. Any language questions, any thoughts, reflections, questions? Things you want to share?
I just had one question that came up in the school district with, it's a program called Artful Teaching. And the head of it had asked, what would be a Tlingit word for that? And I often hear that there is no word for art because it's so intertwined and integrated with life. And I was just curious. I know that was the, when I worked with Nita Reardon and for UPIC, she was saying there is, like, art's not separated. I just was curious if you could talk about that as far as the Tlingit culture, if it's the same way or if it really is a distinct, separate thing.
Yeah, so I guess there's a couple of phrases that come to mind. Let's see, let me put them in. So the phrases that do come to mind when I think about art and artwork, ʼunei, like that's what we found that word in an old recording, and that's the Tlingit word for art, but it really means like something happened, something is happening. That's kind of basically what it. So again, it's not very loose, but that's what we would sort of talk about. Kayaaní would be something that somebody made. And so it really means like the remains of a person's possession. And then Ḳuteeyí is the name that Dastia Ethel Mackinnon came up with for an artist. And so I would say, yeah, there's no direct way to sort of say that, or like, there's a bunch of things in English when people ask us to translate it, we usually say, oh, that doesn't really work like at a conceptual level. I think artful teaching sounds very cool in English. But I also think like, well, what is artful? It means like to do it in an artistic way, kind of. And I was getting scolded the other day because we were, I speak English. I am a creative writer. I teach Tlingit, but I'm not very good at either. I'm okay, but I'm not super great at either language. And I kept saying, we're using the verb for it was either lay or lie. I always forget the difference between those two. And I was using them interchangeably. And I think people were losing their minds but we were working in Tlingit and talking in Tlingit about how they work in singulars and plurals and positions and motions. And it was a very like circumreferential kind of conversation. And so, but I think to say like artful, Kajin Kajaku is like a person's hands fits things together. That's really what that means. And to be fitting is that verb root for kajak. So kajak would mean it's very fitting. It fits together very well. And that's what you can say when something is really well made or well said or well done, is you could say that. It's like it just fits. And so you could certainly use something like that. There's creativity and there's curiosity, like Ḳuteeyí is curiosity. But really, so if the idea is we're going to be using song and stories and drawing and other things like creativity to teach, then yeah, we'd have to probably talk it out and figure out like, because sometimes we have to like look at the English and say like, well, what does that mean? You know, and then once we figure out what it means, then we got to find, and we might end up with something really different. and sort of like go back into the intention of the whole project, right? And in terms, because, and this happens all the time, is we'll have folks who do wonderful things, but don't speak the language. Then they'll ask us to name things. And then sometimes like, it'll be like too, they'll be like, how do you say integrity? Or just some like single word things that work really well in English, but then you're like, can we do something from the Tlingit? And so could we name it in Tlingit and then translate it and then come up with and make the English fit? As Austin Hammond said about when Raven put his nose back on, it doesn't fit very well. And he used fit, which is a negative form of city. But we can certainly, I think it's just going to require conversations and sometimes to re-examine some of these things. And we might end up with something that's just parallel. But,
Gosh, geez, I really like the how you put that. It fits. I lost my notes. Fits something that is well done. It's a person. You said artist or a person's hands fits things together. Yeah, I think that's using art and teaching as an art form, I guess, is a lot of the ways in which the artful teaching is expressed.
Okay. So here, these are some very fitting verbs. So here we have to fit, to be big enough to fit. So these are a little different. It means this qa is pleasant. That's what this one is, qa. There's another qa, which means to go after something, to pursue something. So this one, when you say na, my upper body, qa, pleasant or appropriate or sufficient, ḳuteeyí, size, that it's that big. So it's the right size to be suitable to my body. Áax'w, so jika is actually the wrist. Áax'w qa ḳuteeyí, it's suitable to fit my wrist, so my hand could go. Probably because if the glove don't fit, it's going to either be too short to the wrist or too long. So that's probably the reference point in terms of, yeah, that comes right to the right spot. áax'w qa, and then this, these ḳuteeyí, and it's going to a D verb as well, which is, we can look at that. But that's probably, I don't know, I have to think about that. But so this is just for something to fit, like fits my hands, fit my feet, fit my upper body. And then here's the one to be fitting or suitable or to fit together. Du, that would be short. Yet, their face. Wududlijak, so those would both be short as well. Wudu. They have fitted the name to them. So it's fitting to the, and when you name someone, you'd say, du yet uwasa. The name got put on their face is really what it had. That just sort of is connected there. Wooshed, I have fitted the puzzle pieces together. So I got them to all fit, they all fit together. And then we see this ja, and with ka and ka. So ka is the mouth, ka is the surface of something. So you say, ahsani has akachaq, your, or isani has, sorry, isani has akachaq. Your paternal uncles are good speakers. What they say is fitting. We have to move something into an exact position. The verb root here has to do with moving something invisibly. And then this is the same one, áax'w. And that one sometimes can be to erase things as well. Proper, Ďakusti yan uwajaku atxati. So here we see yan uwajaku at, something that is really fitting. So that could, you know, I don't know, you might say yan uwajaku yach, yan uwajaku at, yach ka'idultu. Teaching people like something that really is very fitting. So maybe. And then we have his speech is fitting, fits in with their actual lineage. Okay. Any other things you folks were thinking about? Questions?
I watched the kind of summit with the different indigenous teachers from Hawaii, Ojibwe, and all the different, not just from the different teachers. And I was thinking of that too, because like how it fits when you're learning and teaching. It's like the master apprentice approach, and then there's the conversation, and then let's not just try to take an English thing and make it into clink it and pry it apart, and you know, it like start the learning process. And it made a lot of sense to me on how it fits together. Like that was a good little video to watch last night.
Nice. And what was the video again? Where did you see it?
It was like you got all the teachers got together. There was Ojibwe, or maybe it was Wisconsin, but then there was a Nupiaq teacher, Dene, Hawaii, and don't want to forget anybody, but all the teachers, you talked about the ways to approach it with a Hawaii leader, with the different teachers. You know, just how they talked about the Nupiaq teacher up in Fairbanks, and he was talking about like if you have somebody to spend the time, master and apprentice, you know, when you don't, it's conversation. And so that was really like, okay, like here's where we're at. This is how it fits, and this is how we approach. And it was like your situation and how you learn, and just go for it. It was good.
Okay. And yeah, and sometimes like in Hawaiian, like I think they used to adopt a lot of, you know, like nursery rhymes, like you grab like Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, you just grab some melody from it because people know it, and then you fit your words to it, which sounds fun, sounds wonderful. And then they started kind of making their own songs, which are sort of hybrids. And then they started saying, oh, well, you know, we have all of our mele, we have all of our songs. Let's just make Hawaiian songs that have new words and new things. And then in a similar trajectory, they started translating so many children's books, and they would just put like sticky notes over it and write it on there. And then they said, okay, well, let's actually have like Hawaiian people doing Hawaiian things. And then they started sort of making their own books too. And so, and then it could be very fun because a lot of them are very diverse and inclusive. So it's not always only Hawaiian people. So you have, when you go to Hawaii, there's lots of different people from lots of different places, including if you go back to certain points, like just before World War II, I think the majority of the population was Japanese in Hawaii. So my experience is they were really conscious of cultures and bringing those things in ways to say, not to say like you excluded us, so now we exclude everybody, but to say like we can make something that's like really inclusive and really fun. So, okay. Okay. Wasabuti Ďakuti. How was Tuesday? Aren't you guys nailed it? You nailed it. Okay. Let's take another examination into back to verb land. So I think we'll do this for a little bit and see how folks are feeling. Let me rearrange my screen so I got things where I want them. So we're going to start sort of practicing moving some of these components around. So I think moving them out of the abstract concept and into the use by just through acts of rotation. So really we're going to try and get used to, like if we start at the top of here, we start going down and changing them. Same here, we start here and go down. And the patterns, I think I got them mixed up in some spots, but they generally go first person plural, second person plural, third person then third person plural, which attaches this out here. Fourth person. We might not do a whole lot with these bottom two. And there's even more than this. But we're going to sort of do it a little bit at a time. Just say, okay, let's not go crazy. Let's do these ones that we'll use all the time. And sometimes we're using like a code, a shorthand code for this stuff. 1S, first person singular. It's the speaker talking about themselves as a single person. First person plural. It's the speaker talking about themselves as a group. Second person singular. It's the speaker talking to a single person about themselves, about them. Like, so this is the you. Second person plural, the y'all. Third person, them. We have transitioned in the past couple of years to using them and them all. And some students do have a very hard time with that. And it's just sort of saying, well, there's no gender there, so why would we add a gender? Because if you look at a lot of the sentences in the verb dictionary, or do they just translate them as him? So as we rewrite that, we're going to change a lot of those to them. Not with the intention of trying to change anybody's language, but just saying, let's get a little closer to how Tlingit functions, and it doesn't make you choose a gender. And then we have had some students who say, I don't identify with either of those genders, so why should I have to pick one, and why should I even see S/he? So we listen to folks, I listen to folks, and I say, yeah, you're right, it is a they. So we're using a singular and plural they as they all and them all, which does drive some people just struggle with the concept a little bit, which is okay. But you do pluralize the third person with hus. So that is one of the big differences, is these ones like, oh yeah, here's a singular one, here's a plural, single plural. This one has one pronoun, and then you pluralize it with this thing that sits in front of the verb. And this hus comes before the objects. Hus chat sechan. They love me. Hus chasechan. I love, or they all love me. I love them all, right? So whenever you're going to go hus chat, hus ha, hus hus yi, and just remember that, because it's very easy to get those ones flipped around. So the hus is sort of like, it's not quite Pluto, but maybe it's Neptune. Okay, so it's out there in the orbit. And when we talk about things going from left to right, the first things you say are here to the last things you say are here. So what we're really thinking about here is objects and subjects, objects and subjects. I think I changed this to red. I'll have to update this drawing. Sorry. Trying to figure out my color. I've been messing around with I think I've finalized my color scheme, but now I had to go back through all these old things, and sometimes I'll find a time when it was orange. So what we're going to start doing is very slowly, we're going to say, like, look at this. It's like a wheel. And we're going to start turning that wheel with a single verb. And just say, look at that, look at that, look at that. Then we're going to start doing this. Hey, look at that, look at that, look at that. After that, which we might run out of time this semester, but we'll see. Then we're going to start doing both of them. And the love verb is a really good one for this. Because then we're going to start sort of, we'll keep this as I, and then I won't love myself, but I'll love all the others. And then we'll switch to we, and we won't love ourselves, but we'll do all the others. Like, you can say I love myself, but that's kind of getting into like being egotistical. So in this case, you would say sh, ch, and then you'd say dzechan. So you'd say shchat dzechan. But that doesn't mean I believe in myself, I take care of it. It means like I'm in love with myself, which is maybe, maybe I'm confessing because I'm an egomaniac or a narcissist or something. So a couple of notes on this before we sort of start looking at some examples. There are some little notes in here. If you have chush, and that could include chush too inside oneself, that is going to, and when you see this little plus D, that means that D component in the classifier needs to be activated. So for you could say X'éig, X'éig. Right on, X'éig. Whoosh to X'éig. So that D gets put in there from the whoosh. If whoosh pops up right before the verb, it should be pushing it plus D. So when we, again, going back, this is the D. So it would be da or di, s, z, gl, sh, j. That's what we mean by saying plus D. It means it's got to switch down to there. So chush and whoosh will do that. So will SH. And then we get the wild card. The someone. The fourth person human. Duh. When you have duh, all the non-zero classifiers, S, L, and SH, this one, this group, and that group, must always be plus D. So if you say like ich, or you say chasechan, there's the si, but you'd say whoosh tudzechan. So it has to go to z, right? Or you'd say, or chat sechan, they singular love me. Chat dudzechan, I am loved. Du causes it to go. You got to go dudze, dudje, dudle. Okay? For all the zero classifiers, they must be minus D. So you can't go duda or dude. The language will not allow it. And we'll see examples of this, and we'll catch ourselves, and we'll switch it back and forth, whichever way it needs to go. Any questions on any of that?
Ḳuteeyí,
Ah,
the fact that shush, shush, and shh go plus D, do you think, is that pronunciation driven or grammatically driven, do you think?
it's grammatic, because it pushes it into what we call middle voice. So the subject is also the object, doing it to the self. And then there are some verbs that are just naturally, like yaudza'a, they inspected it, or yauchza'a, ada yauchza'a, I inspected it. That's just a plus D verb. It's just naturally built that way, plus D. Sheesh. Anything else? Let's put it into action. We're just going to focus on the object now. Right there. Has. Well, chat, ha, yi. Nothing or ka or k, at, and sh. Those are the main ones we're going to be looking at. When is it, for the third person, when is it nothing, and when is it There's only one time it can be
It's when you have both third person.
Yes, a third person subject and so you'd say Chet sechan, they love me. Ha sechan, they love us. Isechan, they love y'all. You. Yi sechan, they love y'all. Asechan, they love them. So that's where you have. But if you said this goes away, if you have any of the other ones, so it would be to say I love them. So it would say Chasechan, Tusechan, Isechan, Yisechan, Asechan. It pops up right there, right? That 3-3, boom, you got to have a. Okay. Has can pluralize the object or the subject or both. You just gotta get it from context. It can get a little fuzzy. Here we go. Here's the verb we're going to use. A. So this, when we're reading these themes, there is an object, there is no subject. Capital O, this is a zero group classifier. We should expect it to be ya because it's a state imperfective. A state imperfective is plus I because it has to be that way to be that way. The plus I says it is that way. That's why you get ya. And we should expect A. We should also note if it's marked high in the theme, this blue text we call the theme, it should not go low. You will not have a low version of this. Ga is the conjugation, so then we could, a command form, be good. Igake. And then it'll also tell us some other things. Like if there's a future, you should have K in front of it. Ke kwak A. If it's in the process of getting better, you should also have K in front of it. Ke nakain. It's getting better. But our focus right now is changing the object and having yak A. Let's try and take turns. Somebody tell me how to say I am good.
Ḳuteeyí.
Yeah, oh, khat yak A. We are good.
Hayak A.
Ha yak A. You are good. Okay, we might be limited on who's talking, so I guess just anybody, so we can keep going.
Yak
Iyak A. Y'all are good.
Yake. Yake.
Yiyak A. Gnachish. They are good. There is no subject in here.
Yak A.
Yeah, oh, yak A. When are we going to use kha and when are we going to use kh? Anybody know that?
Is ka human and k non-human?
No, these are both human. And here's the guiding rule, I guess. It's going to be kh unless there's also a weather verb for that particular thing. So technically, ʼquwak can be good people, people are good, or good weather. But because ʼquwak exists for weather, we'll probably pretty much always use that for weather, and then we would switch it to ʼqayak. So qa is kind of the long form, and Tlingit prefers the short form. But if it's going to get too confusing because there's a weather verb, then we're going to kick it back to qa, which we'll do in this case. So
this is along the same lines as ʼuteeyí and ʼuteeyí, like that when you talk about bad weather.
yeah, because that could technically mean people are evil, but you'd say tlelqa just because it's too confusing.
Ḳuteeyí, which one is the non-human? Because there is a non-human one, right?
Ut is the
Ut,
fourth person non-human. So these are both fourth person, qa and q. However, human, non-human. That's why you say someone or something. And then ut will sometimes create special meanings. Like, for example, if you said ut wudana, most people wouldn't mean, oh, they drank something. That means they went out drinking. They were drinking alcohol. Like it just sort of, it's associated with that. Or one time I said something like áax'w, but I must have said it pretty fast. And Ella said, what did you say? I was like, oh no. Because sometimes they'll, when you're just speaking Tlingit and then they'll say something to you and you're like, I made a big mistake. I said áax'w. She said, I thought you said áax'w. I was like, oh, what's that? She said, it's sex. I don't know why you're talking about that. And I was like, no. I said tuwu sagu, right? But even though we sort of talk about some of these little mistakes, don't worry about it. Like, go for it. We'll fix it later. Because I was talking to a friend of mine, and we're just talking about language learning. And if I know we do a lot of process-driven stuff, and there's a lot to it, but you have to speak it and go for it. Because the more you speak, the more you will catch things. And don't worry about, like, I have to get it all just, don't get it all perfect and then say it. Just say it. And then what you do is try not to be self-conscious, but try to just sort of say, oh yeah, I keep realizing I'm doing this thing when I should be doing that thing. But I think the more you speak, the more you catch those things. And you also start to realize the things you don't know how to say. So, people are good.
Ḳuteeyí.
Yeah, away. Something is good. You really wouldn't say this one, like it kind of doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but just for the sake of the exercise, something is good.
Ḳuteeyí.
Ķuteeyí. And
So
lastly, oh, go ahead.
would that be like our dog, let's say if they were sick, would that be then a question like, how is your dog? Would you say ķuteeyí? Is that for,
This is really like, it's really something, right? And so it's used for like kind of unidentified things, or like, we'll keep an eye out for when we start to see it. Like, for example, Shengit shtuchashtu. I am studying Shengit. Shtu atchashtu. I'm studying. Just something, right? So sometimes it jumps in there to say, not a specific, just something, right? And so sometimes that's the case, but it's usually just some unspecified thing. Whereas your dog would be just a straight third person. And same with a raven, and same with a rock. And so this is really, it says them, but it can also be it as well, which I should adjust. That's a good question. And that's why you really like something is good. Like, it's just, it sounds kind of, I mean, like you could say it, but I couldn't think of a context when you would say that. But you could say something was heard. Somebody heard something. And you're just saying like there was a noise. Them alls is good. They all are good.
Ḥuteeyí.
Good cheese. Ḥuteeyí. So, the cheat code, this thing on the left, plus ḥuteeyí. Like, it's given to you in this exercise. Even though we're learning this new thing, we might be a little nervous about it. And some of us, we might already feel like we're starting to grasp it. And maybe we're waiting for others to give it a shot. But so it's like, ḥuteeyí, ḥuteeyí, iyak'e, yiyak'e, yak'e, ḥuteeyí, atyak'e, ḥuteeyí. The other thing to note is if there is a hyphen on it, it gets attached to the verb, written as a single word. If there's no hyphen, it pops out to the preverb, and that is important. For example, coming back to being evil, like I guess, I don't know if I have, okay, hold on. Let me alter this to become evil. So in this case, we're going to have an object, and now we must have the Irrealis. This says there's something that is not aligning in the logic. It's not that way, or it's comparing two things. It's not that way yet. So there are times when this particular part will pop up. And we are changing the classifier group to SH. This is still a G state verb, still object intransitive, which means there's only an object, but now it's for O to be bad or evil. So,
ʼunei,
uh,
is it classifier group because of ʼcleich, or is
So-
something else happening?
there are a few verbs where you have a positive, a negative, and an opposite. So you could say, ʼu'ke, I'm not good. But I could say, ʼu'ke, and now I'm admitting my evil nature to you all. Right? I'm just kidding about the evil stuff, but it could be to be like, you have good, not good, bad. Just like you can have lucky, unlucky or not lucky, unlucky. So when I gamble, I win. I didn't win this time. I never win, right? So there are, not every verb does this. There's a handful of them that do, and this is one of them, where is actually a different verb because we have changed the classifier. If you change the classifier group, that's a different verb. So now to say, I am bad, what am I going to do? The verb is, let me show you up here. We're going to change this to ush and this to ke, because it's a negative, right? So in this negative must change. So then I'm going to say klech, chat, ush, ke. And then I'm going to say klech, ha, ush, ke, right? So we're matching the pattern, right? Not a lot is changing. This one is attached. And now let me show you why this is important. Because now this I plus gets you I. So now I and have combined. They've contracted into each other. This is something that you will see. And when we go down to this one, Ḳuteeyí ush ke, it does not do that. It will cause some contraction, but it will not combine in that same way. That's why it matters whether we write this attached to the verb or not. So we just have to remember that one attaches, that one attaches, that one attaches. The others are all disconnected. And it's just good writing practice, good sound practice as we start to use these more and more. So now, they bad.
ʼUnei,
Ah,
could you, since I'm taking screenshots of this, could you go back to ʼcleich and can you do that like I with the U and then put what you just did up above, sorry, yeah, up, and so that I can see, so then I can see why it's morphed or changed to the double E. Does that make sense?
mhm. Yeah. So
In
I
that way, I can remember that.
plus is E.
And so, can you make that a double line? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, put both there so I can see where it came from and then what it becomes. Does that make sense? I don't know if I'm asking too much. Sorry, my brain will forget and.
So the key here is like these three things, right? So I plus U is going to get you E. And they will combine. And this is going to be it's going to be a kind of a common pattern when you have these types of things. Like you could say, well, once we get in, I'll have to find other examples. But here's another one. So
And that's only because it's attached. All the other ones, because they are not attached, will never have this double E.
Right.
Well, I'd say it's more the other way around. It's written attached because it does that.
Yeah.
And it would do that whether it was a written language or not.
Yeah. And so it's really trying to match, the writing is trying to match the pattern of the language to say like, okay, those combine in a way that the others don't, which is why we write them as separate words. And then as we practice them too, like really like sometimes we're really putting a pause, like tesh, or it'd say ḳuteeyí, ha yak-a, and it's okay to do it like that. But eventually we're going to say yak-a, ha yak-a, yi yak-a. So they do get pretty close to running into each other too, though. So here's another one. So ḥitzín, ḥitzín, you are strong. But if you ain't been working out, ḥitzín, you're not strong. And then, this is another one that it does have an opposite, but it does something kind of weird. ḥitzín, you weak, right? So I'm not serious. I'm not making fun of anybody, just so we're clear. These are good questions, though. Good things to think about as we keep putting these things together. Okay, what do we do? So then we have, tesh ushke, tesh ka ushke, right? So just sort of showing like this same pattern applies to other verbs, right? So the same thing, we're looking down here on the left, we're plugging that into the formula, and in this case, tesh is outside, and tesh is outside of hus, right? So you would say tesh hus ushke. So maybe tesh is the Pluto, I don't know, to the Neptune, whatever. I'm not very good with my planets. And maybe Pluto isn't even a planet. What happened? Okay. So this one would be tesh ushke, and this would be tesh yi ushke. So again, it's not, there's a separation between those vowels. Yi ushke, ishke. And so these are important fine-tuning distinctions that we're moving into fine-tuning categories. I guess we got to make this. Something is awful. This would work, like, there's something evil here. We don't want that, though. Okay. Will the next verb please step up to be manipulated? We have an object. We have two thematic prefixes, ya and ka. A face and a surface, a vertical and a horizontal surface. We have an S classifier, so we should expect it to be si, because it's a state verb in the imperfective. And this one is on. This little X means it never changes. On every time, long and low, never changes. Whenever we see that X, it's unusual, but also be like, oh man, I don't have to worry about what the stem is doing because I always do the same thing. So we should expect on, and here we go. Everybody's going to be good looking. Good stuff. I am good looking. How are we going to say that? We're only practicing. We're not bragging about ourselves. It's okay.
ḥuteeyí.
We are good looking.
áax'w.
Ha yaksa'an. You are good looking.
Yaxian.
Y'all are good looking.
Yaxian.
Singular, they are good looking.
Yax'an.
People are good looking. There is no weather for this verb, so we will use the preferred short version.
Ḳuteeyí.
Ḳuteeyí. And the ut wouldn't make sense in this case. I guess like handsome mannequin. I don't know. We're not going to deal with it. They all are good looking.
Has Yax'an.
Okay, we'll do one more and we'll take a break. Okay. Well, we're getting a little late in the game here. I don't even know what time it is. My thing says 10:40 at night. So now we switch yakse to tushe. Same verb, same root. Gonna also, it doesn't change. Now we all get to be kind. Everybody's kind. Aw, what nice verbs. So here it is. It's written out for, you know, these slides are designed to give you all the answers. You just got to roll through. And the whole idea is just to practice doing it. No big mystery. No, it's kind of an easy process once we start to realize. And the whole goal is to say, okay, we're just turning this wheel. We're turning this wheel. I am kind. Oh, why are we waiting so long? Are we exposing something about ourselves? I'm just kidding.
Ḥatutli'an.
Ḳuteeyí, goodness cheese. We are kind.
Ḥatutli'an.
You are kind.
Itutli'an.
Itutla'an.
Tutli'an.
Y'all are kind.
Yitushaan.
Itutla'an. Singular, they are kind.
Tutli'an.
Tutla'an. People are kind. Again, we're going to use the short form.
Ḳututli'an.
Tutla'an. They all are kind.
Ḥastutli'an.
Ḥastutli'an. Gunchish. You are all becoming masters of the object pronoun. So, let's take a break. Let's come back in 8 minutes, maybe. So, at 10:52 Eastern Time, whatever that is for you. And then, it just changed on me. So, 10:53 Eastern Time, and we'll roll through this and we'll see where folks are at. Sheesh.
Before we do, I
Oh.
just want to say something, which is I've been going through the Tlingit reference guide. And of course, this is all in there, the patterns.
Right.
Now, Tutli'an isn't in there, and Yakasi'an isn't in there. But in terms of verb patterns and laying out all these options, it's all there. And in order to be able to speak, I'm going to have to memorize enough of this stuff to internalize the patterns. And the place to start is with the object intransitive verbs, because the verb part and the classifier is all right there, and you don't have the subject pronoun in there complicating the pronunciation with contractions and things like that of the verb part. You just have the object, which kind of hangs out there to the left. And so it's easier to memorize and internalize a pattern if you start with the object intransitive verbs. If you start with the ones that are transitive and have both a subject and an object, that's a lot more complicated.
Yes, that's when things start to smush. And so we start with the object to say, look, it's not even going to smush that much. We did a negative one for fun, which then introduces a variable. But just generally speaking, yeah, so you could put Yanik and you could run it all the way through. Ḥuteeyí, you could run it all the way through. Ḥuteeyí, you could run it all the way through. Ḥuteeyí, you could run it all the way through. And now people can be all these different things. That's all the state verbs do, is say it is this certain way. And then there's a handful of them, and that's very useful, because now you could be tired, and you could be good, and you could be strong, and you could all these different things. Yeah, you could stink.
And the only caveat is that all we've looked at is the perfective.
Yes.
There's also all the other tenses, but they're patterned. So
yes. So we start doing this, and we run it all through. Then we move to the perfective with the goal of mastering that. And that does take a little bit longer than this, because this one is sort of like, here it is, this wheel turns. Here it is, this wheel turns. You can move them both at the same time. But then if you're going to want to start moving the verb into these different modes, we're going to have to start moving some other parts. But it's all predictable. You just got to add more and more to your toolbox. Okay, come back at 10:55. But not Alaska time. Jeez, it's a long break. Okay. Sheesh. So to put this into action, some of us might have heard a phrase, ʼunei, and this is how you would kind of write that. This might go like this, ʼunei. And to say, how would you say I am ready?
ʼunei.
ʼunei. We are ready.
ʼunei.
ʻunei. You are ready.
ʻunei.
ʻunei. Away. They are ready. A single they.
ʻunei.
ʻunei. Away. ʻunei. ʻuei. Right? So yeah, so here's it, like, again, like, once we learn these things, then we get to say, oh yeah, here's one with an object. There's only an object there to be ready, right? So here's one with a subject, bam, bam, bam. But when we start introducing a subject, we're only going to use the third person, which is always unmarked. We never put anything in there. So it's going to operate in a very similar way. But then we're going to go through and we're going to go through the next thing is the thematic, and learn what sort of those things are and what they're doing. So this is object and subject as classifier. So we should expect se as a state verb in the imperfective right now. Khan, it's always short and high, never changes. Ooh, that's easy. That'll be easier later in the future when we start moving the verb mode around. For S to love O. So now we are going to be the object of this lover's affection. This one who rolls into class and just loves us all up. Wonderful. They love me.
Ḥatsahan.
Ḥatsahan. They love us.
ḥasahan.
Ḥasahan. They love you.
Isahan.
Isahan. They love y'all.
Yisahan.
Yisahan. They love them. Now we must have a.
Asahan.
Asahan. They love people. We will be using the short form.
Ḳuteeyí.
Asahan. They love something. Again, probably not very sensible thing to say. We're using this just to show the pattern.
Atsahan.
Atsahan. They love them all. We will be using a again. So it'll be there.
Hasahan.
Hasahan.
Sahan.
Hasahan. So same thing here. I don't know why I have that. Ḥatsahan, hasahan, isahan, yisahan, asahan, ḳusahan, atsahan, hasahan. Right? So these are things, again, we can, so I'll put these slides up and we could practice them all. We could see them. We're going to go through this whole thing. We've only got 33 more slides to go. Woo. So we're going to jump to something else. The next thing over in the verb theme, right? So this is the object, right? It's really understanding what it is. It will be these are the things that we start to focus on. Ḳat, ha, I, yi, 0 or a, ka or ḳu, at, and then has plus 0 or a. Those are the main objects we're going to be messing around with. There are others. We'll learn them later. But these are the ones essential to be able to talk. You're usually talking about people, who, what happened to whom and stuff.
Ḳuteeyí, did I miss when the S for hus is used?
Oh, this?
It's like contracted, yeah.
If the word before it ends with a vowel, you have the option of contracting that to the letter S. So, for example, you'd say, they went over there. So to say they went over there, you could say, ade áax'w at. And you could absolutely say, ades'w at. It is this vowel that will trigger that. And it just sort of, like when you listen to an elder with really high fluency, they'll do this a lot. So if something has ye, yes ayaw saqa, for example, this would be, they said this thing to them, right? So you would have ye, has ayaw saqa, which can just become yes ayaw saqa. And this is important so that when you start listening to Tlingit and you're writing it down, you're not like yes, like the fall time, but it's like you just you'll start to figure these things out as they happen. But that is it's kind of one of those things too, where we say Okay, let's focus on getting these pronouns down, and then we start looking at these variables. But that one, it is a kind of a common one. If you put ade in front of it, or ye, or k, case wuat, they went up. Right, same type of thing. Good question.
And I guess I don't understand why the had to go in. Is it to split up the two S's on the very last one? Hasechan.
Oh, for this
Yeah.
one?
Yeah. So is it to split the two S's apart?
This ah?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, so this, so let's take a look at what's going on here. Oops. So for here, if we were to pull all the pieces apart, we have hus plus a 0 s or si and khan. So what triggers this is the 0 right next to it, because the third person pronoun is usually unmarked, right? So for example, if we said, they love me, you get this. And so you get plus, let's separate these, and you get plus. And then you're going to have this whole thing, right? And then if you say, I love them, we'll go hus again. And then we'll say 0, kha, se, khan. So what we're changing these two pronouns. They're right next to each other sometimes. Like a lot of times they're right next to each other. And you can have 0, you can have khat and 0. You have 0 and kha. But you could not have. So if you had something that said like has 0, 0, se, khan, what that would equal is has, se, khan. And it doesn't make sense because you can't have two zeros, like, because the third person pronoun is unmarked, then that triggers the subject, the subject third person is unmarked. That triggers the third person object to become marked so that you know that they are both there. That's the so 3, and we call this, we go 3 plus 3 equals That's usually what we sort of do. And so that's what's going to push it. Like, that third person object is always unmarked unless there's also a third person subject. They to them, it's got to be
Renee. So this is a case where the is grammatically driven rather than contraction or pronunciation driven.
Yep. And so it's like, yeah, we don't mark that. Oh, there's 2 of them? Okay, one has to be marked then. And if it doesn't, go ahead. If it doesn't make sense, go ahead and ask, because then we'll keep talking about it and kind of figure it out.
No, I think I understand. I understood it in the singular, and then in the plural somehow I didn't connect what I knew from the singular to the plural.
Yeah, right. Because then you're adding, it's like this one more variable, and that's all because the third person. So the third person is tricky, right? I would probably say the third person is default in Tlingit because it's not marked. So you just need to mark it if it's not a third person. But then it also has this 0 to and it pluralizes with something outside of the verb, which is also unusual. You got to add this thing in front of it. And so every language has its little quirky things, and this is one of those things with Tlingit. Okay, we're changing our color scheme. Now we gotta go pink. And I gotta fix this thing. Oh no, it's a big mistake on here. Okay, let me fix my mistake. Hold on. There, that's my mistake. Okay. No, this messes up all my spacing and everything. Oh, gee. Okay. Well, in the meantime, so let me remove this from here, and let me go this way. I think that's right. Okay, hold on. Let me change. I'll give you folks an inside view of the next thing that I'll be finishing at some point. And it's always in a state of perpetual near completion. Sure, update the links. So, some of you may have seen the verb component game. And so the verb component game has a big board, and this big board has all these color. Oh, look at the subject turned red. You gotta update the other slideshow. It's always these like, I don't know, I'm always trying to figure things out. And then this is also the view of what it looks like in InDesign. So we'll change this view to like get rid of all the outlines and stuff. So what we're gonna go look at here is this pink. So this pink area, so as we went through, we did, there's some things in the preverb. And this little handbook is gonna have a very brief explanation of all of these things, and then tables that show what these things mean. And then we'll start using this board game. It might be next year, we'll see. But I'm gonna make some videos over the summer so that the whole idea is if I put a verb up, like I said, what did it, Ḳut, what did zateen? You should be able to put all the components on there that are in that verb, which would be Ḳut, y, or sorry, y right here, d right here, z right here, teen right there. But this game will not have the verb roots because there's thousands of them. Okay. So going through, we have done the object. Now the next line over is what we call the thematic. So as we go through, we see there's 1, 2, 3, 4 spots. You can have 4 thematic prefixes. You could, it's possible. But you couldn't have more than that. And you don't have to have 4. There's no set number you have to have. However, if you add or subtract a thematic prefix, you have a whole new verb. You're not just changing a single verb, you're creating a whole new verb. Okay? And so these are some things to start introducing us to the concept, and I've got to fix that one slide. So in the meantime, oh, whoops, this isn't even the right file. Hold on. Well, it is, but it isn't. Where did I put this thing? Hold on. It's the verb component. Ooh, look at all this text about the object pronoun and these colors. So here we are in this pink area. So let me change this as well. So here you're looking inside the sausage making machine at how this stuff gets put together. This is how I do create resources, as I use InDesign and Illustrator. And I'm really trying to do like this color theme thing. Like I really think that this is better than just straight tables. So the thematic prefix is really what you're doing is you're attaching a noun to the verb. You're putting a noun in the front of the verb, and that's going to change the way the verb works. For example, the verb, ʼunei, and this is still a draft form. ʼunei would mean it happened. ʼjene, they are working. Okay? Or this could, there's a noun version of this as well, which is work. So the j is hand. So we see right here, j is hand. Ḳ is mouth. So you, ḳayatunk, they are talking. This is where the noun you ḳatungi comes from for language. If you change ḳ, mouth, to tu, inside, you get you to a tunk. They are thinking. And you could also say you to tungi, thought, as a noun. Wuhich, it happened. Shuwahich, it ran out or it died off. So you added sh, the end of something, onto the verb. And they go in the same spot. Qayatunk, tuwatunk, shuwahich. They go in a predictable location. Achisht, they are spanking them. This does have, there's the because there's an object and a subject there, both third person. But then if you change that to ashachisht, they are clubbing them on the head, because achsha, you put it right into the verb. Body parts can be added to verbs. Very cool. Body parts can have body parts. Verbs can have body parts. Land can have body parts. Here's some more. Yat'ich, it's difficult or it's hard, like a hard surface as well. Ka is a horizontal surface. If I put that on there, kawat'ich, it's a hard mass or it is caked together. If I put ya, the vertical surface or the face, a'ax'w, they kept the song steady. It's like they're kind of holding it with their face, I guess. I don't know. The mouth. Chush kach ḳuteeyí. They talked hard in defending themselves. Okay. Oh, gonna cheesh. I type terribly. If you ever see anything, always feel free to let me know. I'm happy to hear it. I'm not embarrassed by my typos. I make them all the time. So what happens, you can start putting them together. So then they go in a certain order. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'll redo the slides on the other slideshow for next week. We'll pick it up. Shuka, the end and the horizontal surface. You can have both of those things as a shukawa etz. They closed the door quietly. Some of these are kind of unusual verbs, but that's okay. We're just fishing around for examples of multiple thematic prefixes.
ʼUnei,
Ah,
does that verb, does the end in horizontal refer to the fact that the door is moving horizontally?
it's probably has to do with, yeah, because the end of the door, so you got to move it by the end of it, and it's probably going along a surface. And some of the surface ones, they'll make sense, but then others, you're like, I don't know why there's a surface on that. It's just Tlingit logic, right? Here's one with ya and ka, the vertical and the horizontal. Áax'w, to blow it out like a candle. Here's one with qa and ka. ʼUnei, they contorted their mouth. And then you could change qa, mouth, to ya, vertical surface or face. Ḥuteeyí, they wrinkled up their face. Sha and ya, the head and the vertical surface. Ḥuteeyí, they became many, because it's a bunch of heads moving together. Oops, gonna cheesh. J and ka, tich, a Ḳuteeyí, they stretched out the rope. Qa and ka, Kayaaní, they translated it. And ya, do ya a yawane. So the next phase is sort of going 1, 2, 3, 4. They go in these specific slots. They cannot move around, but you can have multiple of them. but you can't have both q and, wait, this isn't, okay. I got to come back to this later. It's a little bit messed up right now. Just in terms of which things are going in what spot. So sorry, this is still a draft. But this is where we're going to pick up, is going through and looking at the meaning. So each of these do have a specific meaning, but some of them are a little bit, just require a little bit of sort of talking through in terms of what they're doing and how they work. But that's where we are in the verb comp, moving just left to right. Keep looking at examples. But the thematic thing, we're going to sort of just look at it as terms of what it is. Then we're going to set it aside. The conjugation stuff, we're going to look at what it is. We're going to set it aside. Then we're going to get to the subject, and we're going to start changing the subject. So the idea is like, let's start changing them before we start adding more and more things to it. Because really what you're doing is when you have a thematic prefix, you have a different verb. So you do that to have new verbs. Like, and once you start going back into the verb dictionary now, when you look at the verb dictionary and you go look up a verb root, like, so we're going to go look up this root. Well, what is ja when we had this fitting together? So if you're curious about that to get more of an understanding of how it works, we scroll down and we see to be fitting. Then we see ya, so that's a 0 classifier, L classifier, L classifier. But then we go down. This has that horizontal surface. Oh, that's sloppy. T, inside. The mouth. And then we can start going through and start thinking about how those things are working in combination. Some of it will make sense. Be like, oh yeah, okay, I see. So now it's something about talking. That's very common. Oh, okay, there's, here's one with ka and k. Okay, we could start to sort of get a sense of how these are working. But the key is going through them one at a time and seeing what they mean. Because these ones, they're kind of clear because they do have a specific meaning. And then that meaning alters the verb. Sheesh. Okay. Anything else before we go?
I really love this board game, Ḳuteeyí, and I appreciate you putting game with grammar, like to really try to make it fun, because it's not easy. So
It is the challenging part where we move out of memorization and into assembly and interpretation, and so we have to have activities and games to do that, which will include conjugate this verb. But we'll get there. We'll get there. Okay, let's cheese, folks. I'll be back in a while.
Yagen.